Okay, so today's presentation is from Ian McRee from the Center for Internet Security and responsible for the community of the Azure CIS standards. So with that, I'll just throw it over to Ian and we'll get rolling.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate this forum and everything that you guys have put together and that you keep it up every week. This is really an awesome forum, and I just want to say thanks everybody for participating in it. Great job. Um, so I'm not normally on this side of the camera and the presentation, so I'll do my best to humble brag and keep this interesting. If it lags, just I don't know, say something interesting in my stead, I guess. um, I I I come from, so I'm an infrastructure guy initially. I've been working you know in infrastructure for the last 15 years, I guess at this point. I did my undergrad in both business and information systems at the Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. I originally hail from the Southwest US, combination of living in San Francisco and Flagstaff, and most recently Salt Lake City. And in Salt Lake City, I just recently completed an MBA and a Master's of Science in Cybersecurity Management. And I hold a CISSP and CISM. Everybody loves alphabet soup, don't they? Um, so as the Azure Cloud Community Leader, I hold kind of an interesting position at CIS, and I thought it would be fun to kind of share this with the community and to also hopefully maybe get you guys engaged. There's some really great volunteer opportunity and CPE opportunities with us, and so kind of hoping to give you the pitch on benchmarks here with the idea that maybe you'll come join us. Um, so let's get started. I'll just give you a quick overview what I'm trying to cover today. Just a quick background on the Center for Internet Security, followed by an understanding of the CIS benchmarks, what they are, how they fit into the bigger security picture, why use secure configuration standards. I know a lot of you are very seasoned vets here. There are some that are also coming from the newer end, and I'm hoping to kind of introduce that concept. So then we'll get into an overview of the benchmarks, the anatomy of the benchmarks and breaking down a recommendation, uh, and then discuss how the benchmarks are developed and how we're representing as best as we can benchmarks for cloud platforms. And then, of course, the hard sell to get you involved if you've got the time and the bandwidth. I know that's always a challenge. So uh, background, Center for Internet Security. That Center for Internet Security is a 501c3, started in the year 2000. There was a need identified by a bunch of our founders, kind of come from the DoD side of things, and they identified that, hey, there's a big gap here where our, state, local, tribal, and territorial organizations may not have all the resources and the capacity that they need to build the appropriate defenses for what is going to, continually become an evolving and ever complex threat landscape. And the vulnerabilities that are built in, of course, remediating all of that is its own challenge. So the Center for Internet Security was started as a brainchild of some of those DoD folks that were trying to help bring forward the right resources to make this possible to kind of preserve those state, local, tribal, and territorial organizations. And so they created the CIS controls, and the controls were initially the CIS top 10, I think, is what they started as. They became the top 20, and then the CIS controls. Now they're formally CIS critical security controls, which are CIS's security framework. And out of the controls came, well, how do we actually accomplish these controls? And the benchmarks, whereas the controls tend to be descriptive, the benchmarks are intended to be prescriptive, and they provide a real how you get this done, in a specific platform that is actionable. So these have become well recognized globally, and we're happy to be able to provide that guidance freely to the world. Really, they're being used globally. So we're also home to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. I'm not going to go too deep into that side. That is an OPSEC observational side of the house where we try to get good threat intel and communicate that to the state, local, tribal, and territorial organizations that follow the MSISAC. So just from a very, very high level, for those of you who are maybe just starting your security journey or just getting interested, the basic concept of security fitness, how mature is an organization, is an important part of understanding where CIS and the benchmarks and controls fit in. As an organization begins its security journey, the first part is just becoming aware of the fact that security is an important concept of your business. As you get a little bit further into it, then you're starting to engage professional organizations and to seek additional awareness from the greater cybersecurity community. And then you begin evaluating policies and procedures. And so my personal firsthand experience with the Center for Internet Security and Controls and Benchmarks is actually on the receiving side of help. I was an IT director for a not-for-profit that was set on getting ISO 27001 and PCI DSS compliant, and it was quite the objective. From nothing and from a limited budget, one of the biggest challenges is really trying to get into actually having policy, knowing that people are following policy, and having things like security configuration that you can rely on actually meaning something. So when I, found the CIS benchmarks and I asked my sysadmins to begin implementing these, they were a lifesaver and massive time saver just to be able to dramatically increase the base level of security that the organization sat with. So, um, without an organization like CIS kind of filling in that gap to help make that jump from no security to some base level of security, I just don't know that it would be possible for a lot of organizations. So that is, I should say, made entirely possible by not just the folks like me who are stewarding the benchmarks, but mostly the community that helps me to develop and vet the security best practice recommendations that we put forward and that we develop. So, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So let's dive into a little bit more about the CIS benchmarks themselves. I'm not going to necessarily go into just the cloud benchmarks or just CIS control. I'm going to try to focus on benchmarks from just a high level because there's a lot of different ways that they apply. We've got something like 100 platforms. In fact, I think that's one of my next slides here. So why secure configurations are key? It's the third most common attack vector for cloud platforms. Misconfigurations are just a constant source of vulnerability and an opportunity for threat actors. Without an effective monitoring of configurations, once you've even set something, knowing that you're able to ensure that it remains that way, say you have a change pushed, which happens to have something in it that you didn't intend for it to be, you could be opening up additional vulnerability. So it is a really key part of maintaining constant security to ensure that not only are you implementing secure configurations, you're maintaining them. So CIS benchmarks cover 100 different, there's 100 different CIS benchmarks that cover 25 plus platforms. And they're recognized by FISMA, FedRAMP, PCI DSS as a good basic way to initially begin your hardening process for various systems. You know, again, emphasizing community developed, like this is a big part of it because, well, okay, so it takes a village, right? These are, each recommendation in this case is the product of that village. You know, each one is vetted and requires input from the community. How we do it, what exactly it's doing, you know, should it even be in there, and what level of maturity an organization should be before applying this kind of recommendation are all things that we you know, consider very carefully. And the community that works on it also gets to, you know, make the final determinations of, you know, is this a consensus accepted recommendation, and should we continue to proceed with it? So, you know, we really believe in that crowdsourced kind of development concept, open source concept behind security, because it is, you know, requires the perspective of many people coming from different backgrounds to be able to effectively determine that this is the right thing to do. So yeah, in short, you know, the actual process behind that is its own, is an iterative part of how we get to having the benchmark put together. We start with community engagement like this. You know, we start with people coming to Workbench and bringing a ticket, or bringing uh, a you know, an issue that they've encountered in the wild. You know, say that they've encountered a trouble actually implementing a specific recommendation. You can go and join us in our community and say, you know, this is not appropriately scoped, or, you know, this process is inaccurate, it's outdated. There is you know, a constant reinvention that occurs behind the development process of the CIS benchmarks. So as we create this, as we create the benchmark, we create a milestone for it for each release. There are some benchmarks, like really heavily utilized benchmarks, have a release cycle of every 6 months. So Azure Foundations, AWS Foundations benchmarks, we release those every 6 months because things are just so constantly changing and it's so heavily used. We want to make sure that we've got the most recent guidance that's available in there. So we create a milestone. We go through beginning the consensus process, and then discussing and adjusting each of the recommendations and the tickets that have come up in between. And through this consensus process, we get to a point where, you know, we've managed to close most of the tickets, address most of the proposed changes, and wrap those into a current version. We package that up, and then we publish. So that process, you know, is gone through for in a different cadence for our different benchmarks, depending on their use, just like I was discussing. So getting into a little bit more of the nitty gritty, what's in an actual benchmark recommendation. This is just an example of one. So we've got a numbering system just so that you can identify where it is. The numbering system is not necessarily consistent between versions of a recommendation, but anyways, it helps to ensure that when you're checking the when you're checking the applicability against your what you've audited for your environment, it's consistent. So within this, of course, you've got title, profile, applicability, which is if you're in a more mature environment, you might be looking at higher level. If you've got more budget, more resources to throw at specific configuration types, you know, you might be able to apply a higher level of profile. Then we give a rationale behind each recommendation, just indicating why we do it, what the impact is in terms of, be it, you know, licensing cost or considerations for scope. And then we provide audit and remediation procedures to indicate exactly how to determine if that setting is appropriately set, or and how to remediate if it is not. along with mapping to the CIS controls. And from the CIS controls, you can also map to other frameworks. So again, referenced by many different industry frameworks. And so within the cloud security benchmarks, we've determined that we need to break kind of standard from the way that we have put the benchmarks together. The benchmarks are intended to be, encapsulated publications that can just be taken to a systems administrator and say, hey, go through this, create the appropriate, GPO or profile or whatever to ensure that you can remediate the necessary infrastructure. In cloud benchmarks, things are a little bit different. Cloud service providers have hundreds of products and services to choose from. And so under just the guise of, say, Microsoft Azure, I'll speak to what I'm familiar with, there are 240 products, and those 240 products all have various considerations within each of their own service categories for how to be implemented. So we've broken out the cloud benchmarks into two different types. There's a foundations benchmark, which as the name suggests, foundational, and then service category benchmarks. So the foundations benchmarks, they are intended to be applied at the tenant or a subscription or account level to secure that entire environment. They're just intended to provide a base level, a foundational level of security for that tenant, subscription, or account, and all feasible recommendations from the foundations benchmarks should be applied. There are also the service category benchmarks, which we've just started releasing in the last year. And so these service categories are intended to be able to cover the many products that exist within different categories. We are trying to follow the product directory of all of the major cloud service providers, just to have a consistent source of truth and to be able to also follow their naming. There's so many constantly shifting product names within cloud environments that we want to make sure that every time we release, we're consistent with that. So within the service category benchmarks, we create a section for each product, and then the recommendations for that product are all contained within that section. Another important point for the service category benchmarks, the only recommendation that should be applied are for the services that are actually used in the environment. Obviously, if you are not using a product, you shouldn't be applying those recommendations. They'll add up in terms of cost for the environment pretty quickly. So which platforms do we cover with the cloud benchmarks? AWS and Azure, of course, are the really, really big ones. We have foundation and services for both of those that we're building out. There's a long way to go with our service category benchmarks. We're not even 25% of the way with where we want to go with those. And then we've got benchmarks for Microsoft 365, Dynamics Cloud Platform, Google Workspace, IBM Cloud Foundations, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, and Snowflake. I'm trying not to make this too pitchy, but this is the thing is these are all free,
Hey,
right?
Ian,
Yeah.
pitch away, because
No, but like that's fair. The thing is this is not like, this is a freely available product that's helping to hold up the base level of security that's available to people coming from challenged environments the world over, right? Think about non-governmental organizations that are doing critical things to help to save people from, let's just say, malaria or landmines, right? These are not organizations that are going to have a great amount of money put together for their cybersecurity infrastructure. You know, it is not necessarily in line with what their mission is, but it is still heavily affecting what they might be able to do, whether or not they will be able to continue to function, right? Because if they get hit with ransomware, or the wrong threat actor decides to target them, it could be incredibly detrimental to what their mission is and what their capacity to perform is. So, there are places where these benchmarks really can make all of the difference. So, I know a lot of you are coming from having a tremendous amount of experience in the environment, and I hope that you might consider joining us. We do have, these communities where you can open up the tickets and the discussions to create the proposed changes to help us improve the guidance that we're providing out there. This is, I like I think it's attributed to Kennedy, the aphorism that, all ships sail higher on a rising tide. We are trying to be the rising tide, trying to hold up that base availability of cybersecurity for the most challenged, and providing a strong base for everybody to build upon as well. And I know a lot of you are coming from organizations that also integrate the CIS benchmarks into your products. You know, they're the reason that they're so broadly followed and relied upon is truly because they are that tide. So it does require as much help as we can possibly get, though. I am simply a steward for the community. I do my best to bring in every recommendation, every comment, and turn it into actionable, vetted information that can be taken by an administrator, read off of a page and turned into an actionable result. So yeah, sincerely, I hope that you'll consider becoming a contributor and editor. We rely on contributors and editors in our communities, and it's a great way to get CPEs if you have certifications that you need to fulfill upon. And if you have VTO with your organization, a lot of organizations will provide VTO. We're a not-for-profit, and great way for you to make a meaningful impact with your expertise. So at that,
So
thank
Ian,
you.
there's a
Def
question in the chat from Nathaniel. He says, "What's the time commitment?" I'm assuming it's whatever time people want to commit to it. But he says, "What's it? Is this something he'd like to volunteer?" And he wants to know how much time.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Nathaniel. It's as much or as little as you want. We have a platform workbench at workbench.cisecurity.org. This guy right here. And if you sign into that platform, you can create an account. You can access all of the different communities, join the ones that you have the most knowledge in, join the ones that you're curious about. Look up, what recommendations exist there. If you know specific vulnerabilities and a specific opportunity to plug that vulnerability, that's the perfect place to put it. You will get a broad impact by contributing there. And
Um,
I have a question
right.
too. So I'm a college student studying computer science, but I have an interest in cybersecurity. I've done an intro help desk internship before, and I was interested in potentially joining your community as like either a contributor or editor. The thing is, I don't have a ton of cybersecurity experience. What would be good tasks for me, basically?
So actually that's perfect. I mean, we are a great place to begin your experience as a cybersecurity professional too, because there's a lot of research. Writing out the description, writing out the procedure, putting together references, helping us find good references that say that, that really help to provide the basis for why a recommendation is appropriate. These are all pieces that will definitely help you in your professional journey. There's recommendations also have like MITRE mappings if you wanted to cross-reference against the MITRE attack, and mapping against, so mapping is taking the underlying concept of a recommendation and applying that to the descriptive recommendation that you might find in a control framework like NIST 853, NIST CSF, FedRAMP, CIS, critical security controls. Those control frameworks provide the descriptive. The recommendation provides the prescriptive, how you do that. And so all of the details that you find in that prescriptive recommendation ultimately map to, that is to say that there's you can draw a relationship between the prescriptive and the descriptive.
Offer a little bit less technical advice for newcomers that want to get engaged in the community. There are many ways to volunteer. Time commitment can be as little or as much as you want. And so what I recommend, if you're brand new and you don't know where to start, register as a volunteer, ask for a mentor to help you calibrate, and you can start to shadow the meetings that they go to as they start to talk about MITRE attacks and matrices. You don't need to participate. You can just learn, and you can ask your mentor, what does this mean? How does this work? Google yourself into it, and then look for opportunities where you can contribute. Editing, right? Putting things in bullet points, correlating, doing some research, finding citations. There's lots of ways to contribute, even if you don't have knowledge. So volunteer, ask for a mentor to help you calibrate, and somebody will dedicate the time.
Okay. Thanks for your advice, Tyler.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll just throw in on that too, which is in the early days of my career, I got chances to participate on boards like that, like when we were defining SSL and things like that. And it was extremely useful, even though I was really junior at the time. I mean, I didn't know a lot at all, but just getting to be in those groups and hearing what they were saying, the language they were using, the way they thought about things, the stupid ways they argued about things, all all of the above. It taught me so much. So yeah, volunteer, even if you don't think you have anything to offer. That's the main thing, right? Like your time is what you're offering, and you're also uh, getting from it by offering your time.
Another important point for people that are early career, volunteering with these types of organizations, you can put that volunteer experience on your LinkedIn. Look at my LinkedIn. It matters for hiring managers. They see that you're getting involved in industry. Even if you're early career, you're doing something, you're trying. It's like an extracurricular on a college application. So think about it a little selfishly. What can you best leverage for your next step in your career?
What's up, Jay? Jay, you're on mute.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here. I had a question. Could you describe what your relationship is with the providers? And I have the wrong webcam, so I should be looking that way. My understanding is that quite often, say Google or IBM Cloud may be the first ones to suggest a certain control of like how their landscape should be configured. Is this something, that where there's an established sort of pipeline, like, comes in from the provider and then the community reacts, or how does that work?
So it depends on where the most activity is coming from, and we still do that our own independent vetting of everything that does come in, right? So um, if a I mean, I guess there are also potentially cases where we might have a like a self-running benchmark, which is something that has a community that's active enough that is running on its own, but most require additional attention. And in most cases, there's a variety of different places that will bring input in from. The tickets, proposed changes, discussions, research, and of course, if somebody brings it up on a call, we have different communities have different community calls. The cadence is usually discussed in the discussion forum for that community. But like in Azure, for example, we have weekly community calls, and on those calls, things will be brought up if somebody has encountered something. But those are actually coming from, for the most part, I've had some Microsoft folks who have been active in my community, and they kind of come and go. It depends on what their priorities are, just like any volunteering endeavor, right? So my most consistent folks within my community, for example, are actually somebody with a healthcare provider in Europe, somebody who works for a grocery chain in the United States, and let's see, there's somebody who works for a direct competitor of Wiz.
So
And
that sounds like really more like the practitioner level rather
yes,
than supplier level.
precisely. I think the
Oh.
people who are actually most active within the communities tend to be practitioners, because of the fact that it's an opportunity for them to also ensure that their skills are sharp, that they're aware of blips on the radar for what they need to know for their particular domains of knowledge.
Awesome, thanks.
So wait, is Neil Carpenter a contributor?
He is not currently.
Oh,
Would he like to be?
is it?
But, I appreciate when you hear competitor of Wiz, you immediately think of me.
That's awesome. Hey, Alhaji had an interesting question in the chat. He said, "What are some challenges?" I'm not sure you would see this directly, Ian, but maybe. What are some challenges you've seen implementing CIS control list? Says, I'm assuming government buy-in, but there could be more.
Sorry, is that specific to the CIS controls?
Yeah, it sounds like Alhaji. Maybe you could jump in. Maybe he's
Yes,
not
that
with-
was more so on. Yeah, that was more so on the controls.
On the control side. I can't speak specifically to that. That's my head is buried in the benchmarks and the prescriptive and the platform side of things. So
Got it.
I can't necessarily speak to the control side from my own experience as an IT director for an organization that was implementing different control frameworks. Executive buy-in.
I would figure, yeah.
And resourcing, yeah.
I think the hard part in implementing it is just how do you, and that's why products like Orca and Wiz and Prisma and, exist, which is, you know, the standards are changing all the time. How do you keep everybody on the same page across the board? How do you enforce it when they're building it? How do you enforce it after they built it? How do you enforce it after the rules change, after it's been deployed, right? So there's a lot of challenges in taking a really good CIS standard and making sure that everybody's living up to it in the organization. But yeah, again, that's why a lot of us have jobs. Any more questions for Ian?
Back to the thank you slide. Thank you. I know your attention is valuable and your time is valuable, and I appreciate your attention and your time here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
You guys
spending it
do
with me.
like the Lord's work, honestly. Like the amount of organizations that rely on your guidance. I may modify them slightly, but like, a lot of our policies are CIS based, as I'm sure they are for many other organizations. So thank you for all the work that you guys do.
It's a pleasure to be of service. I mean, it really is a job of service, and I'm happy to be of service and contributing in such a way. It's a very meaningful way to do my day to day.
No, and I can't say how much I appreciate you showing up and doing a presentation for our group. It's really useful. And we will publish this on the website and it'll be available for everybody forever. So,
And I think there was at least one more question in chat. Nathaniel asks, curious to know what the processes are when updating a CIS benchmark.
oh yeah.
When updating a CIS benchmark, the process, I'll go back here. I've got a perfect slide for it, which is this one. So you see we've got engage community, define scope, create draft, consensus begins, discuss and adjust, consensus met, and then publish. And so we, you see that V next line that goes back to create draft. That is iterate ad infinitum. It is iterate into the future forever. It is a big part of, for every platform that remains relevant, we do this publication cycle depending on how popular that particular benchmark is. So something like the Azure Foundations, for example, we publish that every 6 months, and we go through that same cycle, publish a CIS benchmark, and then back to create the draft, and then back to reviewing all the guidance, and beginning consensus, discussing and adjusting, meeting consensus, and then publishing, and then iterate, iterate, iterate.
Awesome. David, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I suppose I've done a lot of implementation on, again, the benchmarks have been, I suppose, a game changer for me in consulting. We've used them throughout, but I always wondered if things like RPA bots for implementation, or even, having, the tools that we use are very much, we have to use a third party tool to compare what you guys make to what's actually in place. And there's a commercial gap there that you guys could probably close a lot easier and quicker than everybody else. It may not be your priority to do that, but you've already done all of the hard work. Is it something that you guys had even thought about? I was just wondering, because I've brought this to a few different people before from the other side of it,
Yeah,
where you guys are already
it's
doing all of the work anyway.
it's definitely a meat and potatoes part of the gold mine pursuit of security right now. It is where, so what you're basically talking about is automated assessment, automated assessment and automated remediation, and those there's a lot of different ways to kind of get to that end goal. um, CIS has a basic platform that we do to provide that for the platforms that we have been able to create that automated assessment for already. We don't have that for our cloud communities. Those are the cloud benchmarks. The cloud benchmarks are pros only. We provide a lot of detail in the cloud benchmarks to help make it possible, but then you find that folks who are bringing in the benchmarks, like your Wiz or Orca, Tenable, Qualys, or even Microsoft and Microsoft Defender for Cloud with their policy initiatives. They all provide a push towards automated assessment and automated remediation. So there's a lot of tools that are out there to help with that, but absolutely, you're discussing where a lot of people are making their professional name right now, in helping to produce that cloud security posture management, CSPM.
Yeah, I've actually just remembered you guys partnered with Nerdio as well, this year, well, last year. So Nerdio is AVD and Azure Virtual Desktop and a lot of other they have a new cloud product as well. So I think you guys have partnered with those guys to give them a lot of this base framework as well. So it'll probably help do some of it. But I was just wondering, from, again, I know it's one of these things where I would love to just be able to go and point an RPA boss at, an Active Directory and go, here, go do, version 1 and harden Active Directory for me. See it, off you go. Or something like that. I think there's, if it doesn't exist, it should. So thanks for your time.
Misha.
Yeah, again, I just want to echo what others were saying in terms of thanking you for the work you do here. It's really, really valuable. It's helped me immensely through my career. I'm curious, you spoke a little bit about the maintenance of benchmarks once you've adopted a new product that you're going to create a benchmark for. What does the process look like when you're trying to decide whether you want to provide coverage for a new product?
Good question. You're talking outside of my pay grade. That's really in product management. When we're looking at coverage, of course it's gonna depend on what kind of pre-existing coverage we have. If we have any pre-existing coverage, like with that developer, what kind of deployment we're looking at in terms of how popular it is out there, and what kind of severity of vulnerabilities might exist with that platform. I mean, I can think of oh shoot, there are certain platforms that that are out there that we would like to have covered that that we don't have any coverage for, and quite simply, we just don't have the internal expertise or people from external expertise that are willing to come forward and to help make that publication happen. So volunteers make all the difference in this stuff. We need help to bring these things to reality.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to stop the recording if there's no more questions, and then we can just open up